Welcome to Community Conversations. I'm Michael Witsch for LMC Media, and with me on screen is Tony Buettner. Tony is the national spokesperson for Blue Zones. Blue Zones, Tony, what is that all about?
Blue zones are places around the world. There's 5 of them where people on average live 10 years longer than we do here in America. This has been an ongoing 25-year research project to identify those populations, to study each and every one of them, to find commonalities, and most importantly, to understand why are these people living so much longer with just a fraction of the chronic disease that we suffer here in America. A funny story on how—
Wait, may I interrupt you just to say that you're coming at the invitation of the Center for Continuing Education, which has been in our community for 100 years this year. They're celebrating that birthday, and I guess this is their gift to the community, a birthday gift that they're giving everybody by telling them about or having them learn from you about Blue Zones. So continue.
Well, first of all, I couldn't be more excited to be invited on this centennial. I'm very excited to share our work with the community and hope that everyone that attends is able to extract a small nugget of wisdom from the talk. Where the name Blue Zones came from, our first or our second Blue Zone community hotspot that we found was in Sardinia, Italy, where people live about 10, well, men live 10 years longer than we do here in America. And when the research team was trying to identify the core hotspot of these centenarians, we were making circles of clusters, and we were using a blue magic marker. So once we found an area that actually had 4 centenarians per 1,000 people, we pointed to that map and said, that's where we need to go, to the Blue Zones. So that's how it was founded.
Now you're coming, as I said, at the invitation of the Center for Continuing Education, and it's on May 6th at Mamaroneck High School. It's at 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. and this is a free event. But I need to tell viewers that you've got to register ahead of time, and the information about where to go will be on your screen before we end this conversation. So the term Blue Zones now refers to a number of these spots around the globe where people are living more healthfully and more fulfilled lives.
Yes, we have 5 Blue Zones longevity hotspots around the world. Those places are first in Okinawa, where you have the longest lived women. They live about 12 years longer than we do. As I mentioned, Sardinia, Italy is the home of the longest lived men, on average about 10 years longer. We do have a Blue Zone longevity hotspot here in the United States in Loma Linda, California, amongst the Seventh-day Adventists. Something called the Adventist Health Study has been tracking this population for about 40 years. It's the gold standard. That population, again, is living about 10 years longer than we do. And what's so interesting about this hotspot is it's an American city like all the rest, but somehow this community is eking out an additional 10 years. We find another Blue Zone longevity hotspot in the Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica, and then on the island of Icaria in Greece, where we find almost no chronic disease or dementia. So a very interesting hotspot there.
So does this all have to do just with, I'm assuming, diet and exercise? Or is there more to it?
There certainly is more to it. Over the last 25 years, we've studied these longevity hotspots and have found that every one of these populations have 9 commonalities. And we call them the Power 9. In other words, lessons for us all to live a healthy life. And indeed, the first one is the concept of moving naturally. We know that longevity is tied by about 80% to our living environment and our lifestyles. So these populations live in environments and have lifestyles that subtly but relentlessly nudge them into physical movement. So we're not talking gyms, we're not talking marathons, we're talking low intensity exercise. We find in these populations this concept of a sense of purpose. these populations wake up every morning. They have a sense of purpose, they live it, and researchers tell us that that's worth about 7 good years of extra life. They have time, they have ways to downshift or reverse stress. Simple things like their faith or natural movement or gardening, but again, ways to reduce stress that cause inflammation. They eat primarily a plant-based diet. Every Blue Zone diet is cornerstoned by beans. They're good for you. They're inexpensive. They're filling. They do eat some meat, but surprisingly only about 5 times a month. It's usually a celebratory event, and the portion size is that of a deck of cards. They have strategies not to overeat. They do enjoy a glass of wine with a healthy meal in 4 of those 5 Blue Zones, always with family, always with friends and community. And then the foundation that we find is this family first concept of keeping your aging parents close, nurturing your kids, the support of healthy families. They have faith. And we know this sense of faith adds 4 to 14 years in some populations. And then who you hang out with, we call it the right tribe, has this profound effect on your well-being. If your 3 best friends smoke, you have 160% greater chance of smoking. And that's same with isolation, same with obesity, same with other unhealthy habits. But in these Blue Zones, you see these friends supporting each other into healthy pursuits. And it's not at all or nothing concept, but we know on average, if you're partaking in these 9 Power 9 activities, on average, you can gain about 10 years of extra life.
Wow. So has this been tried in any other city in the United States that has not originally been identified?
It has, and I think that's the body of work that we're all most proud of. Back in 2010, we were approached by AARP and the United Health Foundation after Dan wrote his first book called The Blue Zones. And
Dan, to clarify, is your brother.
Dan Buettner, yeah, is my brother, founder and CEO. We were asked if we could replicate a Blue Zone in an average American city. We put out an RFP to find communities that were bold innovators that would try evidence-based, science-backed nudges, defaults, and kind of pledge items to see if we could replicate reducing chronic disease and risk factors. We chose a city by the name of Albert Lea, Minnesota, out of those 97. And after just 1 short year, we find people eating better, moving more, building a community for people where it's easy to bike and walk. And we saw about 500 million media impressions, and city workers' healthcare claims come down 49% in that year. Since that time, we've replicated this work now in over 90 cities in America, from the South to the North, to the East, to the West, affluent communities and some of the poorest communities in the country, with extraordinary results and growth in this model.
Well, knowing the folks at the Center for Continuing Education, I know that they're always interested in helping the community. So I imagine that the goal is to help us in Mamaroneck, Larchmont, Greater Westchester, where they draw their audience to improve their lives. What kind of organization does it take locally to get into a Blue Zone project?
So typically our work has been sponsored by the following organizations: large insurers that insure a population, that are nonprofit organizations that have a model set up to give back to the community. They like our work because we measure rigorously and we focus on permanent and semi-permanent changes. We actually hire a staff from the community. We have a national team of trainers and experts. We spend about a year just doing preparation work to really understand the community, to build a leadership of volunteers that lead this work, to hire a staff, to understand what the community is doing well and where there's challenges, and to build a extensive blueprint and executed over a 5 to 10 year period. So this type of well-being change at a community level doesn't happen overnight. But what we've learned is if we focus on permanent and semi-permanent changes to your living environment, and that could be your city, it could be your house, it could be the school that your children go to, it could be your work site, the restaurants you go to, the grocery stores. But if those environments make it easier for you to make a healthy choice at a population level, extraordinary things can happen.
Wow. It sounds wonderful. I know I'll be there, and I need to remind people that they have to register, and the place to register is the website for the Larchmont Mamaroneck Community Center for Continuing Education, which is LMCCE.org. And again, they're celebrating 100 years this year, and maybe we'll all live to be centenarians, if I said that word right.
Neat.
Thank you so much, Tony Buettner, for agreeing to be on Community Conversation. And we'll look forward to seeing you on May 6th, 7 p.m. at Mamaroneck High School, a free event. Register today. Thank you again, Tony.
Thank you so much. My honor.